Hey there, Twisters, and welcome, hockey fans. My name is Nick, and today I'm going to review the documentary Unrivaled from ESPN. It's about the rivalry between the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche back in the 1990s and into the early 2000s. So I've actually watched this all the way through 2 times, and I wanted to weigh in with my thoughts and opinions about this. And because I'm really a neutral fan in this rivalry, I've actually decided to go reach out to both ends of the spectrum. So I've incorporated videos recorded by a diehard Red Wings fan and a diehard Avalanche fan in our community, the Twist Brigade here. So if you're new here, you like talking about hockey rivalries and history and culture, definitely join our growing hockey community here on YouTube by tapping that red subscribe button down below. And guys, let me know in the comments what stands out to you most about this rivalry over the years. Do you think that it still has some substance now, even though they're playing in different conferences? So sound off in the comments down below. So first of all, what's the overall premise with ESPN's Unrivaled? So to answer that, it starts with the 1996 Western Conference Final when Claude Lemieux of the Colorado Avalanche lays an ill-advised hit, a cheap shot on Chris Draper of the Detroit Red Wings. And then you flash forward about a year from then, before the playoffs, March 26th of 1997, what became known as Fight Night at the Joe, or Joe Louis Arena. So a line brawl erupts on the ice with Claude Lemieux out there, and it's actually Darren McCarty of the Red Wings just absolutely laying all kinds of knuckle sandwiches to the face of Claude Lemieux, who turtles in that situation. And so McCarty sticks up for Draper from the hit last year, and that's just the backstory in its simplest terms, right? So 25 years later, actually on the 25th anniversary, McCarty and Lemieux reunite, and at this point in their relationship, if you even want to call it that, they're actually amicable towards each other. Even Darren McCarty calls Lemieux a friend of his. So McCarty MCs an event. I'm not sure if it was he who hosted it himself or the Red Wings or like ESPN, but ESPN is filming this. So it's an event with about, a couple hundred people maybe in Detroit. And McCarty is sitting down to talk to the fans about that night 25 years ago and everything building up to it and everything about the rivalry. And he brings in Claude Lemieux as well. So it's a little bit of a sit-down conversation between the two of them. And so it's really interesting how, as they kind of reflect on the rivalry throughout the past couple of decades. These are some of the other key moments discussed in the documentary. So the Red Wings lost in the Stanley Cup Final in 1995 to Claude Lemieux and the New Jersey Devils. So that was definitely a key piece of the backstory. Then in that Western Conference Final in Game 3, Slava Kozlov, his hit on Adam Foote is really what I think sets the precedent for this rivalry. So then Lemieux punches Kozlov in the back of the head, and so they do discuss that at length quite a bit. That was an interesting segment. And then the hit on Chris Draper and just the mind-boggling details of that injury and how absolutely gruesome it was for Draper. Fight Night at the Joe, talking about all of the security and police presence there and the death threats that Lemieux was facing and all the drama around that. Then the Lemieux and McCarty fight during the 1997-98 regular season, where they both consensually fought each other versus what happened in 1997. And then lastly, really with the Vlad Konstantinov injury and how that kind of closes the chapter, perhaps on the height of the rivalry, I would say. Now, ESPN does a fantastic job of bringing in several players from both of these two teams and also some folks from the media at that time and coaching staff and whatnot. So you can expect interview segments from players like Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, Adam Foote, Patrick Waugh. On the Red Wings side, Brendan Shanahan, Steve Yzerman, Chris Draper, and even Vladimir Konstantinov is interviewed. And then from the perspective of media and coaching staff, you have Gary Thorne, hit me right in the feels just hearing his voice. Mickey Redmond, of course, from the Red Wings, Ken Daniels, Bob Wojciechowski, Peter McNabb, Brian Burke, yep, you all know Brian Burke, coaches Scotty Bowman for the Red Wings, and Mark Crawford. God, what a character he was for the Avalanche. And even briefly, Gary Bettman does make an appearance here. All right, so now I'll share with you what I enjoyed most about this documentary, what stood out to me the most as well. So first of all, I just thought the interview segments were terrifically done. The breadth of personalities that were brought in were just fantastic. I mentioned those guys just a moment ago there, but also having that extra layer where you do have, maybe the trainer for the Detroit Red Wings talking about Chris Draper's injury, or perhaps Gary Thorne, speaking about what it was like for him as a broadcaster in his, long range of experiences in professional sports media. So I did enjoy just kind of how those clips were filmed, and also how they were, I think, very tastefully inserted throughout this documentary. So fantastic job with that. And of course, they even had Vlad Konstantinov weighing in on his thoughts with the rivalry. And of course, Vlad, he's not able to speak all that much, but even so, just the fact that they brought him in is pretty remarkable. Second of all, it's an ESPN documentary, and they do a fantastic job with these. The editing is just terrific. The opening credits, just, oh man, I was fired up. The way that they used music, splicing in game footage. They, of course, had footage from all throughout that rivalry in the 1990s, so they did a terrific job with that. And yeah, as somebody who grew up around this time, I was about 9 years old when this rivalry really clicked. And I myself, I was a neutral fan, but this is around the time where I was going to hockey games and just enjoying life and playing competitive sports. Absolutely was a huge piece of that as a kid. And so it did hit me in the nostalgia nerve, so I enjoyed that quite a bit. Then you've got sort of the two narrative drivers of this documentary with Darren McCarty and Claude Lemieux. Darren McCarty, it never left the rink. I mean, he is still just so plugged in to his career and to playing professionally and to playing against the Colorado Avalanche. Man, he still just wears it all on his sleeve. But of course, he's gotten a lot of perspective over the years as well. Befriending Lemieux is certainly a huge component to that. But he's a character. I don't get tired of watching him talk, honestly. So he was a fantastic focal point to this, and Lemieux was as well. I mean, he had to get up in front of a bunch of Red Wings fans and talk about one of the most gruesome evenings that we've seen in that era of hockey. So Lemieux was also very charismatic. He had some great one-liners as well. So I thought that those two guys as focal points for this, that was a good choice. And then I think it's also interesting kind of looking back on that era, right? First of all, this documentary in several ways shows you just how different the NHL was back then versus how it is right now. So I just, had a few notes on this. First of all, Brian Burke was working in player safety at the time, and he was reflecting on the hit to Adam Foote by Slava Kozlov. And he said, look, if it didn't require more than 10 stitches, you weren't going to be suspended. So that was an interesting kind of standard that he set back then. After the game, when Lemieux had, punched Kozlov in the back of the head, so I think he got chirped by Scotty Bowman. Bowman's like literally lashing out at Lemieux when he's walking, out of the arena or something with his wife and his child. And I don't know if he's on the bus at this point, but literally Lemieux steps on to the Red Wings bus, just steps in there and he looks at everybody and he's like, "You got a problem?" And then he turns around and leaves. I don't know if we would see something like that. It's almost like it's out of one of those wrestling storylines or something like that. Chris Draper was actually interviewed right after Game 6. So he's got media swarming as his face has been completely warped by Claude Lemieux, which I don't think that would ever happen at all. And also with Draper, he even mentioned that, first of all, he refused to be taken off the ice on a stretcher, or at least the trainer had talked about that. When it was almost like he'd been curb stomped. Second of all, because they were playing in Denver that night, he should have stayed in a Denver hospital that night, but he wanted to fly back with his teammates and then get treatment. So really team first. So I thought that was interesting. And then no one was suspended or ejected or anything like that during the line brawl that ensued in 1997. I don't know if, we don't see things like that ever in the NHL these days. There was even a goalie fight. Right? There were two of them for Patrick Waugh. And one last point before I get into a few criticisms that I have of this documentary. It really does tell us why this is the story of that era of hockey. I'm talking about the 1990s to the mid-2000s, where it was a heavier hockey. It was slower, a lot more clutching and grabbing, as Shannon would say on his channel. and how, that essence of a dynasty was starting to kind of lose its luster, right? The Oilers of the 80s were the last true dynasty. And, now we're in this totally different era after the lockouts where you've had, a more rigid salary cap. You've had a game that focuses more on speed and skill. Here, this was about, really, this film shows that more, just as much, if not more, important than winning the Stanley Cup and scoring goals and having Hall of Fame players. It really was about fraternity. And so there were various qualities of fraternity, being able to stick up for your teammate and having a good off-ice relationship with them and being able to celebrate when everything goes right and you win the Stanley Cup. Like, all of those qualities are just magnified so well in this documentary. We're going to segue into something that I can complete my thoughts around. What didn't I like about this? What do I think were the faults or the flaws of this documentary? The first thing that I'll point out is that, yes, it does start with Claude Lemieux, and I love how it did that and how he won the Stanley Cup and the Conn Smythe, by the way, against the Red Wings in 1995. And, of course, he joins the Avalanche the next year, and they win the Stanley Cup. But after that, as we transition away from the Avalanche winning that cup in 1996 and really start talking about Draper's injury and that sort of thing, the rest of the documentary, the last 70% of it, really does feel Red Wings heavy. And it kind of reminds me of how it's almost like a continuation of the Russian 5 documentary, which I absolutely love. And it's still filmed well and has the same editing and, terrific interviews and whatnot. But even so, it becomes less about the rivalry between these two teams, and it becomes more about, like, the payback, as Red Wings fans would call it. It becomes more about them redeeming themselves after decades without a Stanley Cup and winning not just a cup in 97, but also one in 1998. So, unfortunately, I do leave this film thinking that it was actually more of a Red Wings-esque production and not a objective look at both sides of the rivalry. But the good thing about that is that ESPN Plus has an extended version of this documentary. So I would certainly recommend this to Avalanche fans and to everybody. If you haven't seen this already, watch the extended version through ESPN Plus. It balances out the rivalry a lot more. The first half, or nearly the first half, is like all Avalanche, or pretty heavy on the Avs. The second half is much more heavy on the Red Wings. So, like in the first half of the extended version, they talk a lot about the Quebec Nordiques and that move to Denver and how much of a stark contrast it was for the players in those two environments, especially when they first arrived in Denver. It talks about the first game that the Avalanche played at home, and it was against the Detroit Red Wings. So that was certainly an interesting story I didn't know anything about. And then it also has like a very meaty segment on the Patrick Waugh trade from Montreal, where he was super unhappy and playing hockey in Quebec alongside the Nordiques there. And then he certainly adds some fuel to the fire in this rivalry by fighting Mike Vernon and Chris Osgood. So anyway, I'm glad that they added that stuff in and made a separate version, because to me, I think this encapsulates the rivalry a little bit better. Another thing that I wanted to point out here was that the Avalanche and the Red Wings, they didn't just meet in the playoffs in 1996 and 97. They also met in 1999, 2000, 2002, and 2008. So really there, in a 6-year period or a 7-season period, they met 5 times in the playoffs. And the thing is that ESPN didn't include any footage or any storylines or any content about that whatsoever. It's weird because they chose instead to really focus on the Red Wings, not just winning that Stanley Cup in 1998, but also Vlad Konstantinov's injury and the impact that had on the team for that season. So I found that kind of odd, because even though I certainly don't get tired of hearing about the Konstantinov story, it's amazing, and that's why I love the Russian Five so much, in part. But to me, that doesn't really say anything about the rivalry between these two teams. It comes full circle for a brief moment when Joe Sakic talks about that was the one day where he was a Detroit Red Wing fan, because, of course, he got to see Konstantinov, being taken around the arena, holding the Stanley Cup with his teammates. So that to me was certainly a little bit of a misstep in the narrative journey of this documentary. And then my last criticism is that while it did a fantastic job of bringing in the players, coaching and training staff, and various representatives from the hockey media, it didn't have any fan interviews. It didn't have any celebrities coming in to talk about the rivalry. It didn't talk about in depth things like, radio stations calling in to the players' hotels to wake them up in the middle of the night. That was something that was mentioned in the documentary. But that's a huge critical component to the rivalry as well, how it affects all of us. And so I'm upset that they didn't actually pull in anybody to talk about that here in the current year. So that was a missed opportunity there. Would have loved to see, somebody like Trey Parker, creator of South Park, talk about being an Avs fan and, working on the car team while trying to watch his team win the Stanley Cup. Like that would have been a cool story. Or from the Red Wings, somebody like John C. McGinley from Platoon and Scrubs, where he's seen wearing his Red Wings jersey, would have loved to see some segments on that sort of thing. So that was one other sort of missed opportunity. But despite my criticisms, I absolutely do recommend watching Unrivaled, especially if you can watch the extended version, as I was talking about earlier. So that's through ESPN Plus. Had a good time watching this 2 times all the way through. And I think that even though it does kind of get away from the rivalry in parts, it's still just great storytelling and even better production value. So it definitely is a winner in my book in those respects. Anyway, how did it perform with our fans of both teams? So now we're going to turn it over to Bill, who's an Avalanche fan, and then we'll go over to Dan, who's a Red Wings fan. So guys, take it away.
Hey Twisters, welcome to my shrine here in Denver, Colorado. My name is Bill Snyder. I'm a journeyman electrician right here in Denver, Colorado. It was a great documentary. I thought covered it very well. There was a lot of things I learned that I never would have known before. The one thing is that actually Detroit scored 9 goals on Waugh previously before he came to Colorado. I didn't know that. So basically, I think Detroit started the rivalry. And one thing that rekindled the whole thing for me was the hatred. We hated the Wings. I look back on it, and you always think, that was a bad hit or that was messed up, but they would come back and do something to us, and then it just fueled that hatred. I kind of thought, don't want to really talk too much crap about this, but as the Detroit Red Wings fans were filing into Joe Louis Arena to watch this documentary, we were in Tampa winning our third Stanley Cup. So pretty awesome. I really appreciate you having me to do this reaction video. There was things that I learned on this documentary that I never would have thought. I never would have thought Lemieux and McCarty would have been friends. So to me, that's awesome to bridge the gap between the fans and the actual teams and the players on the ice. And congratulations, Colorado Avs, 2022 Stanley Cup champs. So enjoy it. And, hopefully this rivalry will continue at some point. But, hopefully it, whatever. Hopefully it mellows out. Maybe, I don't know. We loved it. We loved saying, Red Wings suck. Red Wings suck.
Okay, so I just finished watching Unrivaled, Avalanche Red Wings, and I'm not gonna lie, the last 15 minutes, that got me. Watching Vladimir Konstantinov like that, seeing him come back out onto the ice. I've seen that 100 times, and every time it still gets me. Just to watch a player of his caliber, and not only a player, but just a person, such an all-around good guy, have his life cut short in the way that it did. Not cut short, but his life altered in the way that it did, and then to see him be able to come out onto the ice and celebrate with his teammates, with his brothers like that. And my hat really does go off to the Avalanche players for showing their class to him too. I thought that was a great documentary. I'm 13 years old again, back in Linden, Michigan, watching my Red Wings play against the ultimate bad guys, the Colorado Avalanche. To this day, I cringe every time I have to say those 2 words. That is a rivalry. What made that rivalry so special was it wasn't even the hatred between the players, because that was pure hatred, but for the fans. I mean, when you have a rivalry where the fans are so emotionally involved. I mean, if you watched hockey, I'm 37. If you watched hockey in the 90s, in the late 90s, early 2000s, you know about Red Wings Avalanche. You know that was a whole other level. I mean, here's two teams that don't like each other, and here's Red Wings and here's Avalanche. I mean, for crying out loud, when you have a rivalry, when both goalies just look at each other and it's like, well, everybody else is fighting, let's throw knucks, and they're skating at 2.5 miles an hour down the ice, looking at each other going, I'm going to get you when I get there, and then they just go at it. You have something special. Man, that was fun. I mean, and then Darren McCarty. How can you not love Darren McCarty if you are a Red Wings fan? Some sad truths is D-Mac will never end up in the Hall of Fame. He's never going to get his number retired by the Red Wings. They're not going to end up in the rafters. But you know what? He's okay with that. I'm okay with that. Because if you are a Red Wings fan and you say the two names, Darren McCarty, you just smile. He was the epitome of what it meant to be a hockey player on the Detroit Red Wings. And he still is. He embodied the spirit of that team. Because he himself, he just wasn't a player. He is a Red Wings fan. I mean, when he was playing, you could tell that, yes, his goal, his objective was to go out there and just kick the other team's ass. But not only that, he was a fan of the Red Wings while he was playing on the Red Wings. Man, that is our guy. He, to this day, is one of my all-time favorite Red Wings. I thought it was a great documentary. The fact that it was just a story of the people who lived it on both sides, I thought it was great. I live in the state of Wyoming now, and I'm 4 hours north of Denver. And I am surrounded, I am knee-deep in Colorado Avalanche fans. And the one thing, since I've moved here, I've had so many conversations with them, but the one thing that we all can agree on was just how special that was, how fun that was. And we miss it. And, for the guys, for the older people, the hatred is still there. It is always going to be there. I hate the Colorado Avalanche, but I love the rivalry. This was a great documentary. Go Red Wings. Nick, thanks for asking me to be a part of this. It's been a blast, brother. Take care, everybody.
Well, there you have it, guys. So you can be a Red Wings fan, you can be an Avalanche fan, or you can be a neutral fan like myself and still really like this documentary. So thank you so much, Dan and Bill. Thank you for your support of this channel. It was fun featuring you guys, and I hope to do something like this more often in the future. Anyway, Twisters, let me know in the comments down below, what did you think of this documentary? What stood out to you most about this rivalry over the years? And also, do you want to see more reviews of hockey movies, hockey TV shows, and the like? So comment down below and stick around for more great features covering hockey history and culture here on Twisted Wrister Hockey. Leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and hit the notification bell. That way you know when I'm producing content. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day or evening, and I'll talk hockey with you again real soon. Ciao.